It is just a lovely day, isn't it? When you get to wake up and not have to research politics. Granted, I look into the news still, but today was something a little different. I did a podcast earlier with Chrissy Mayer. She was hilarious. I think it's going to come out next week. It wasn't live, but she's going to release it. It was a lot of fun. And then tonight, I have a special guest, an alien scientist. Now, it's not an alien scientist, it's an alien scientist. So it's actually a human being. Jeremy, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Adam?
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. We've been trying to do this for quite some time now.
Hey,
And
man, this is great, man. I'm glad to finally get on the show with you. People were expecting a dude who was like gray or green. I was reading the chat, but sorry to disappoint.
Yeah, sorry, it's an actual human being. And you it looks like you stole that beanie from Tim. Now, you were on the Timcast show recently, right? You didn't steal his beanie,
Nah,
did you?
I got one that looks just like it, man. But I got a little scratch here on my forehead by the
What happened?
cat. So I was petting the cat earlier. I was being a little
On your
he got
forehead?
scared. I was holding him up here and he was like standing on my shoulders and I was messing with him a little bit too much and
Okay,
he
so
like
you did it to yourself.
I did it to myself. I asked for it. I didn't think he would do it, and he did it, and I was like,
Oh,
all
that's
right.
funny.
But yeah, I'm a big cat lover, and
Cool.
I live in Rhode Island. Um, you were just asking about that. We're trying to set up a podcast here and stuff because it seems like the thing to do now. And
Yeah, it is. That's cool. I like the idea of you having a podcast because you have a lot to offer. I mean, we've had a
thanks.
few conversations, but what I've heard is very cool. I mean, you're into anti-gravity research, UFO stuff, alien tech. This is cool stuff. We're gonna get into it. Man, how do you even start? Where do we? Why don't you give us a little bit of your background? Like, how did you even get into this stuff? Where did you get your start into this kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I grew up in the '90s, I say, with you know unsolved mysteries. We had,
Ah, X
Flight of the,
Files.
X Files, Flight of the Navigator, Men in Black,
Mm-hmm.
Independence Day. What was that movie with the bots that could reproduce themselves? They were like self-replicating androids. It was called
Ah,
Batteries Not Included.
I never saw that
Uh,
one.
that was another one. I don't know. There was all these cool videos, in the '90s and stuff, and then I read books on like on the Chariot of the Gods on ancient. That was like the one that was the basis of Ancient Aliens, which became that big TV series for like the past 20
Aliens.
years. Yeah, so that's
Aliens.
all that's we've been surrounded with it, and of course Bob Lazar on
Bob
Unsolved
Lazar. I see
Mysteries and
chat's trying
stuff.
to ask him about Bob Lazar.
Right. So Bob Lazar definitely got me into it. Wanted me. I was like, and then when I read a book called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, which was about Richard Feynman, who is a
Okay.
PhD physicist. He won the Nobel Prize for quantum electrodynamics, and he was recruited like at age 18 to go work on the Manhattan Project out at Los Alamos, and really brilliant guy, and started my fascination with physics and with top secret research programs because like this guy said this guy's Bob Lazar was on TV saying that he worked on alien spacecraft and
Yeah.
that there's real programs in the government that do this kind of stuff. So
And you're like, let me
certainly
at
that got
it.
me a little
Let me get a
friggin'
piece of that.
interested. Not now it's like mainstream, everybody knows about this and stuff, but back in like the '90s it was like we thought it was like this big top secret thing, and
Yeah.
I was hooked, man, and I don't know. Some people like cars and girls. I like cars and girls, but this was just my thing. It just sucked me in. It was what I would do with all my time, and they had to learn as much physics as possible, as especially stuff that was anything connected to classified programs, like going back to Project Rainbow, which was the CIA's operation out at Area 51, where they were doing radar that started all their invisibility and stealth and cloaking stuff. Um,
Cool.
it was like this was doing all the research on the history of the start of radar, how like Tesla had so many of these patents and ideas. He made a remote control boat at the 1893 World's Fair.
Tesla
Really,
did
Tesla
a
had
remote
remote control.
control
Yeah,
boat.
it was remotely controlled, and he had it
Whoa.
all. He had all the things figured out for it, and it could remotely control this electric boat with a remote control. And it was at the 1893 World's Fair. So Tesla had a lot of this stuff figured out decades ahead of the rest of the world, and he was going to meetings with the military and telling them about, hey, I have this thing, we can see ships, we can use this stuff called radar, and we send these waves out and they bounce back, and we can tell where the ships are with it. And they're like, this guy's fucking nuts. This guy's
Please don't
crazy.
swear
Oh,
if you
sorry.
don't mind. Sorry everyone. That's okay. So don't no worries. Just moving forward. But it does drive your point home though that they
It
thought he was
drives it home.
crazy.
They thought he was bat
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
yeah.
guano.
He was
So,
crazy.
so that's
Simply
the
put.
idea. It's a lot of what is it? Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic,
From
and
Magic, yep.
that's pretty much the way I look at it, and that's the way I kind of felt. That's the way I felt because I've been sort of talking about this kind of stuff and talking about the research, researching this stuff in detail for the past, since like 2004 is when was when I really got into it like hardcore.
And
And
what changed then in 2004, 2005?
I I moved to Boston, and I was living in Revere at the time working in up in Cambridge and Watertown actually, and I met a group of individuals from a local, they were local activists, and they gave me some literature and some DVDs and stuff, and I started getting into conspiracies because I read a book called Behold a Pale Horse. That was like one of the books that started me into it, and it started me down the JFK rabbit hole and into like RFK and the CIA and reading. So I started reading all kinds of books about the CIA, like Philip Agee's CIA Diary. Started studying, spycraft, the history of all these operations and stuff, and reading a lot of Noam Chomsky, his earlier stuff, exposing a lot of CIA stuff, and a lot of these other guys like Mike Rupert, Michael C. Rupert, Terry Reed, a number of like the list could go on. Then I started reading like Russ Baker's work on Family of Secrets, and I was reading a lot of like deep state conspiracy kind of stuff, and then but there was some of that alien stuff in there. But I'd kind of like discredited or wrote aliens off a lot, because I was also going to school to study physics at the same time, and
Okay.
learning a lot of science that was like, and a lot of the scientists, a lot of my teachers were like really, against UFOs and like in some of these other ideas and stuff too. Even cold fusion, when I first brought it up to my professor, like, that's pseudoscience, right? And then I ended up going to investigate it more because I was like, oh, MIT is putting on, in 2014, MIT put on a cold fusion IAP course where it was like like early January before classes start, they have this week of free downtime. And so they host open to the course, fun classes for the faculty that the faculty can host. So it's a week long class. And there was a week long class put on by Dr. Peter Hagelstein and Dr. Mitchell Schwartz on cold fusion. And so I went up to MIT and I filmed it and I put it on the internet and started reporting on this and getting interested in cold fusion research that was being done because I was like, wow, MIT. I thought MIT debunked cold fusion, and then like
Yeah.
why are this? So there's different people obviously that some people kept the light alive and we're looking still for it. 20 years later, here we are. And then they had a colloquium conference there over the summer, and where they invited people from all over the world to present at this week, like really long conference with lots of speakers in a big hall. The first hall that they put us in for the conference was actually too small. They didn't think this many people would show up, but they actually moved us to a bigger conference hall at the campus at MIT, and so I filmed a bunch of that stuff and put that up online. That was 2014, but I'm skipping ahead quite a bit here because
Yeah.
we went ahead 10 years. So in 2000, probably 2008, I started getting into like anti-gravity research, and started like, well, has there been any kind of like government history of anti-gravity and stuff? And obviously, like you find that stuff about Biefeld Brown and lifters, and that even NASA was doing a lot of research into this up until recently. There's been research that you can find that they've sort of continued this. The Biefeld Brown effect is pretty much, we've definitively proved it's ion wind, and not anti-gravity. It's not like a coupling between electromagnetism and gravity. It's just basically, yeah, you're energizing ions in air and you're forcing them to move and then pushing yourself by like swimming with in the ion wind.
Hmm.
And so it's useful. You can still make things that fly with it, but it's not real anti-gravity. But it's still useful for a lot of things. And so this was used in actually to break the sound barrier. The nose cone of uh, the X1 experimental craft that broke the sound barrier that Chuck Yeager flew. The nose cone of it's electrically charged to kind of like it actually creates an ion bow shock. It takes the bow shock off the front nose cone of the craft. So because that's
Oh,
one of the problems with when it goes supersonic is that there's this bow shock that would rip the craft apart, and it starts at the nose cone. And so they energize the nose cone, so it creates this ion barrier which
cool.
pushes the wind away ahead of the craft going through. So it dampens the shock on the bow of the craft,
And that was
which
that was years ago, decades ago.
and that was decades ago. That was like the
Wow,
50s. So
that's cool.
and it's interesting because then you start going into this, and a lot of this was classified. It's all been declassified in the years since,
Yeah,
or unclassified. Some of it was never really classified because a lot of this stuff exists in the scientific literature, but people aren't aware because unless they're studying to be scientists, they're not reading the scientific literature. And even if they did, it probably wouldn't do them any good because it's really hard to get through. It's not
yeah,
easy reading.
yeah. You got to
So
understand a lot of different facets of all of it to really grasp what it's saying.
it's so deep, again, some of the best research that I've found in this is in the scientific literature and going through the science, and that takes a lot of time because you got to go through the best way is through the bibliographies, and then tracing down their sources and making sure you understand all the source material going back. Because I've been trying to trace a lot of this stuff back through the programs and the scientists who've worked on it over the years, and I've come up with like tables and lists of like all the scientists' names over the years. That like, okay, who every time I come across a new name, it goes on this table, and then you years active, the things that they worked on. There's you get what's called their curriculum vitae, and I learned a lot of this stuff by going through because I believed Bob Lazar, and I was trying to like prove, I was trying to prove that to my professors and show them like, hey, there's these programs that exist, and trying to tell people about this stuff. And I met a lot of military guys that really worked out at Area 51. And I knew a guy that worked. I've actually met a guy because I was talking so much about Area 51 and all these
Hmm.
secret programs. I met people from there that were like, hey, listen, you're a smart kid. Let me take you under my wing and show you some stuff and really teach you some stuff. So, the Roadrunners guys, those guys, like is a whole organization of people that like we used to work. They're Area 51 veterans, and they know there's certain stuff they're allowed to talk about now because it's declassified. And it's really cool as this stuff gets older and we're going into the future. A lot of the stuff is becoming declassified, so we're in an interesting time period right now
Yeah.
where we're learning a lot of the missing pieces of the history and a lot of missing physics, and it's quite interesting. And
Well, there's that executive order too that all classified UFO information has to be declassified in 90 days, which is, I mean,
yeah,
almost done, right? I mean, when it's coming up soon, should like another like month or something, and then the limit comes and they have to declassify everything.
I
It's
laugh at
interesting.
that because they're so busy right
Why?
now with everything going on. They don't have like I've tagged them on Twitter or tried to like call my congressman or talk to. They don't care about this. They don't know anything about this. Not on
Right.
the level that I do. Certainly they would. I could technically debrief them or brief them. In fact, I heard that one of the members of Senator Marco. Don't quote me on this, but I heard a rumor that Senator Marco Rubio, who started that whole, he's the head of that Intelligence Select Committee
Okay.
on that UAP thing. I
Mm.
heard that he had an aide that was watching our conferences to
Really?
learn about this
Your
stuff.
stuff.
Right, because what we
Cool.
did, you know what we did, right?
No, what did
Like,
you do? Tell us about it.
so we went and got like I went first off. I've been like trying to research the history of this stuff, so I know a lot about it, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
I go back to these conferences. Like, you go back to DARPA and DARPA, all the programs that get how do these programs come in? Where do these SAPs come from? Right. So SAP is a special access program.
Okay.
It has its own classification and its own kind of, it's above top secret. It's what they call above top secret. It's a special access program. It means that you even if you have an above top secret security clearance, you still can't access this unless you have special access.
I see.
Because it's a special access
So
program.
it's beyond classified.
So it's like the beyond classified stuff. It's the
Yeah.
real deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of these programs, there's science. Obviously, you have to go with what scientists are doing in real science, because this isn't freaking. I mean, this isn't freaking. Um, this isn't a laboratory in a Marvel Comics book. This is the real life here we're talking about. We're talking
Yeah.
about real organizations and the way that things really work. It's not like a Hulk comic. So it's what they have is these conferences. One of them was called STAFE 2, and one of them was called the Estes Park Conference. And those were the two main propulsion conferences where all the scientists would meet and go and present their new scientists would come and present ideas at these conferences. And there's always a DARPA guy in the conference waiting for the recruiter to say, all right, this is a person that we want to take. So this is like where they're recruiting out of. So if you want to get recruited and you're a person that wants to get recruited into these kinds of secret programs, you have to go to school, become a scientist, and start researching the types of topics that we talk about, and then go to these conferences and present new ideas so that you can get recruited, because that's where they recruit from. And this
Can I
is
ask you? Can I ask you something?
yeah.
Did you get recruited?
I
Have you,
haven't been recruited yet. I don't
are
think
you
I'm
like
smart
bummed
enough
about
or
that? Are
something.
you a little sore? Like
I
they
think I'm
never.
too public for that. You know
Is
what
that
I
what it
mean?
is? You're too
I don't
public?
know. It's like they want people. The thing is, they want people that are their noses in the books, and not in a microphone on a podcast, and talking about and blabbing about this stuff on the
Yeah.
internet. They
Right,
want
right,
people
right.
that are really just subject matter experts, and because there's nerds out there that are just so absorbed in their work that they're not interested in talking about it, and they're antisocial anyway, so they don't like talking to people. So it's perfect, and those are the kind of people they tend to recruit more, I
Mm.
would say. And and of course, it took me a number of years. I dropped out of college and then went back and then changed my major and then dropped out again and then went back and changed my major back to physics and then finally finished in 2012. Um, you know,
Way to finish it up. Way to finish it.
but it just so happened that I was so caught up and so distracted with all this other research, and I was learning so much more just doing research on the internet, that I was just, I don't know, it's hard to keep track, keep focus
Yeah.
and stuff. But I eventually got through it, and it's a lot of math. That's really what the problem is. Is tons of really, I mean,
Fun.
physicists just do like,
Physics.
it's just, yeah, it's basically mathematical. I don't know. Yeah, it's exercise. It's quite a bit of, they make you do a lot of it, because there's a lot of it in physics, and
So
that's
I want
hard.
to bring us back a little bit. You started talking about
Yeah.
MIT and
Yeah.
cold fusion, and I know for a fact MIT has makes leaps and bounds on many different things. They are always ahead of the game. They were making touchscreen computers in the 80s. And people were like, why would you do this? Well, who's going to want touchscreen anything? And then sure enough, everything's touchscreen now. And like, so I know MIT is really, I mean, they're making, um, they're working on basically making replicators, like 3D printing biological materials. Really cool stuff's coming out of MIT. So if you're telling me back in like the mid aughts that they were working on cold fusion, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if all of a sudden MIT comes out like, "Hey, cold fusion, it's not a pseudoscience. What do you know about cold fusion?" And what is your like view? Like, what is cold
Okay,
fusion?
so
Break it
let's
down
go
for us.
back to the 80s. There was a guy one guy who was working on cold fusion at MIT, and his name was Eugene Malov.
Okay.
And there was a couple other people at MIT. I'm not sure their names, but they basically, when the Pons and Fleischmann stuff came out, they did a study on it. Then
What
I
is
heard
that?
that
The what?
the Pons and Fleischmann was the original study. So they were the two award-winning electrochemists at the University of it's out in Salt Lake City. I think it was what was the name? BYU. Was
Okay.
it BYU? I think that's where they first discovered it, and they had a press conference that said, these were award-winning electrochemists. They were pretty sure of their work. They had studied this, and they were saying they were getting extra heat out of this, and they believed it was catalyzed fusion because they were forcing so much deuterium atoms into the palladium lattice of this cathode, so that they basically, when you stuff all these deuterium atoms in the lattice, they're so tightly packed in the crystal structure of this metal that they actually start fusing when you energize it. And they were actually reporting it. And so they had reported it because they wanted to, show it. But they made a mistake of going to like a press conference rather than trying to publish it through the scientific literature and waiting, years and years. But it's so like hard and tedious, and the methods for doing that in science are so, and there's such a gauntlet of getting your stuff published, and there's so many people that are standing in the way, and then also the energy companies. There's a lot of rumors about conspiracy theories. There always have been about like energy inventions and new energy inventions, that anything that threatens the oil companies or the
Yep.
monopolies like gets destroyed or bought out.
I
So they
mean,
were
energy
scared.
is it's the biggest
It's
like
big money,
money mover around the planet, right? Everything revolves
definitely.
around energy. It's all energy.
It's
It's all about that.
huge.
It's the biggest. Like what's bigger than energy? Maybe food, but energy is required to bring food everywhere. So it's all about the energy, gas, electricity. So as soon as there's something free energy, like they don't want to hear free energy, they
Right.
want to hear um, I need to get paid. Like basically JP Morgan shutting Tesla down. It's like, well, free energy in the air. We can't charge people for it. No, 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 no. Sorry.
So they had went public with it, and then what happened is MIT and Caltech kind of did their simultaneous studies on it, and on both sides of the
And this was the
universe,
80s, in the 80s
in the
now.
80s
Okay.
to debunk it. And there was some controversy around the MIT thing because they held a party for the death of cold fusion, and they sent out advertisements for it, and it was before the data was even back from the lab experiments. So they basically, it shows the
Weird.
bias of like how they were so desperate and wanting, they debunked it, and it was debunked in their mind before they had even looked at it, and they didn't like do real, they didn't do like, it was bias in the science, basically, it shows.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's many, could be potentially many reasons for that. But in any case, years later, people are still researching it. The U.S. Navy, NASA has reported now that they're finding positive results in these experiments.
Cool.
So you can look up there was a recent NASA study that came out on cold fusion, and it's like, don't be surprised if we're using this on the space station and space shuttle in like 5 to 10 years. It's so it's no longer becoming a taboo subject, I think, because we're gradually, I don't know, I think maybe they needed to make the the rest of their money or something before they let the cat out of the bag. But for some reason now it's kind of like coming out of the bag.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I like to think that I had some part in that, because of me posting that and drawing attention. I got a lot of people that were interested in cold fusion when I started covering that on my channel and started talking about it, because it was kind of like this rogue. It's always been this rogue small field, even with the little attention that I brought to it with my small channel.
Yeah.
And so it's awesome that it's getting out to your huge audience now through your channel, man. And through Tim, when I talked about it on Timcast a couple of weeks ago. 'Cause,
Yeah, yeah. I'm excited. I mean, if this, NASA's interested in this because I think about space all the time. I always like to think, how are we going to move forward? And part of that is energy in space and propulsion in space. And I know you have some stuff about future propulsions. I want to hear what
yeah.
you have to say about that. But on the energy factor, it's exciting to hear that it's starting to companies are starting to realize space is going to be a thing. Actually, we're kind of approaching. We got companies, orbital assembly, working on a space construction, basically a 3D printer for space stations. Like these things are being made. People are designing these things to build this stuff, and it's one thing to build it, but then it's another thing to power it when it travels. So man, cold fusion would be incredible, and the fact that NASA's working on it is pretty cool.
So
But
back to propulsion. I mean, of course, we
yeah,
talk
that's
about
what I
a
was
lot
gonna
about
say.
anti-gravity and propulsion, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But you need energy in order to have build a craft with propulsion. It's part of like, how do you power the thing? Well, you need energy.
Right.
So you need your energy source. So it's almost like I've had a lot of people come into our conferences and be like, well, why are we even having this conversation? You should be working on the energy problem first, because once you have energy, you can do pretty much anything. You can build any kind of propulsion you want. Once you have an energy source that produces enough energy, you can pretty much do whatever you want. But the energy source is the bigger problem. But
Right.
anyways,
Exactly.
so it is a two double. It's the other edge of the sword. So it's something that is in my focus and something that I am paying attention to and working on. But back to the whole thing, we were talking about those conferences. Like they were the Estes Park conference and the State 2 conference, and that's where
Hmm.
like basically I found a majority of the interesting papers and anti-gravity research, at least the stuff over the last 3 to 4 decades. The stuff
Wow.
that's before that goes into a lot of other programs and companies. A lot of it was just, there was only a couple aerospace companies that were involved: Northrop Grumman Aerospace, Martin Marietta, and the Avro car was another one that was working on it way back in the day. They built the VZ9 Avro car and the Coanda effect. They were researching. Those are like the U.S. Air Force's first flying saucer craft.
Cool.
Byfeld Brown, of course. There was a number of companies that he had, Electrodyne, what was it? Something research, Midland Research Associates, I think. So there's a bunch of little companies, Vero Corporation, little things that you come across back in the day. Let me think. There was another guy named Henry William Wallace who had patented a bunch of patents on this so-called kinematic effect, or what's called gravitomagnetism, like
Cool.
a magnetic component of the gravity field that they thought they could use to manipulate gravity. And there was a whole bunch of inventions, and he was from Valley Forge, PA, and worked for General Electric Corporation and did a bunch of anti-gravity research for GE. So there's a whole bunch of this stuff we've put together like all in one place, just so people can find it all and research it. But then we said, oh, that's not enough to go and read about this stuff. It's like, yeah, anyone could write that. It could have been made up by the counterintelligence to fool the Russians during the Cold War. It might not even be
Right.
real.
Right.
So how do we know it's even real? So we got to this point where we're like, we got to start doing experiments on this stuff and actually building it and testing it, because I met a couple guys out. You come across all this UFO stuff, right? Right when we commented on Twitter, someone came back and posted a documentary about secret space program and some of these alleged whistleblowers that have come forward saying that they worked on a secret space program that flies active soldier missions to Mars and the moon and all this stuff. And then there's the Nazi Hannibal. So, I mean, we get some crazy people on my channel sometimes when
I'm
when
sure.
we open it up and like just let them come in, and it's like, I'm like, wow, man, there's some deep brainwashing going out there on the internet with some of this stuff, man, and it's
Oh
nice
yeah.
to like pull yourself out of the rabbit hole a little bit before you get like before it becomes a mental illness. I'm surprised that I've lasted this long after over a decade in the field, sometimes, but um, you have to stick with the science. You have to stick with verifiable evidence and facts,
Real
because otherwise,
science.
otherwise it's just a story. And what is science? What is real science? It's the scientific method, and the scientific method is doing experiments. So it's like,
Yes.
if you can't build this in the lab, so that the whole debate was right. Me and this, I don't believe in this necessarily. I think that according to all the physicists that I talk to, and I'm starting to have more like PhDs and real scientists on the show, and that's why I want to start a podcast specifically to talk to more scientists and get more scientists involved in the podcast. We don't see enough scientists getting on podcasts and
Agreed.
talking. You know what I mean? And it needs to
It's a
happen.
bunch of people with opinions.
It's a bunch of
I
opinions,
mean,
and I
that's
want
what
to.
I am, but
Yeah.
I want to give people
No.
that have the PhDs the platform, that's I would love to bring more people on to explain it to me. So, well,
Absolutely. So,
what do you think is gravity? I'm always curious about what gravity is, and I want to hear your take on what gravity is. What is gravity?
all right. So my best theory. We have a lot of different theories, and there's almost a problem with too many theories
Yeah.
and not enough falsifiability or ways to test those theories. There's a couple good ones though, like antimatter makes anti-gravity, or that it's somehow this twister effect of rotating and torsion, that you're actually, pulling the space time and compressing the space time through torsion, and that you can change the, warp space time like that. And
Hmm.
but there's other ways. The best way that I've heard, the best scheme that I've heard, is this idea of using trapped light. That basically that space time itself is generated by the flow of light and the path of light and the path that light takes.
Hmm.
So it's sort of this idea that light is causing the warping and the folds in space time, by the presence of light and by the paths that it takes, and that light itself is actually, it actually is space-time. That space-time is communicating. Matter is communicating through this material we call space-time, through what we call light or photonic interactions. It's this electromagnetic fields or waves or
Yeah.
vibrations, right? So if everything's vibrations, the best model that you can say is, we take two boats and put them in this pond, and then you start vibrating the water, and all those vibrations go all over the water. But between the two boats, there's certain vibrations that are damped, and it causes a weird effect, is a net force on them, and they actually will rotate around each other, and eventually, just from the vibration of the waves in the water, these random vibrations in the water, the boats will actually come together and then stick together and stick together. And that's sort of the best theory I've seen for what gravity is that it's this as the what we call the ether, the electromagnetic, not luminiferous ether, but the whatever the jelly of electromagnetic vibrations that hold everything together, will actually cause gravity. It creates the space time, and it causes the ripples in space time, which create gravity. And that if we can bend that light and cause distortions in that light and the way that light interacts with everything in our mass through these surface shells, these optical materials on the hull of the craft, which trap light and bend light, which is some of these more advanced materials that I've been talking about for the past 10 years. And then I finally get vindicated when we get unclassified reports showing that, yes, the military, these secret programs have been researching spin glasses. They have been researching metallic glass. They have been researching these types of materials that we can use to readily, in the optical crystals, quasi crystals, metamaterials, those
That
types of
are able
material.
that are I'm sorry, that are able to bend light.
They're able to trap and bend light.
Wow.
And
This is almost leading into what would be considered warp drive then, right? I mean,
Yeah,
if that's
yeah.
the
This is
case.
like essentially a warp drive, and the way that I believe that we're gonna have a guy on who's I've got a whole bunch of questions to ask. He's coming on this weekend. He's author of this book behind me right here. Let me grab it real quick. One
Sure,
second.
sure. Cool.
Because this really opened up a lot of doors. This book was published, I think, 2008, 2009. Let me just check. This is the name of it, and
Paul
it was,
Laviolette,
yeah,
Violet,
Paul,
Violette,
La Violette, yes,
the Violet, Secrets of
2008,
Anti-Gravity Propulsion. Cool. That
right?
seems like a cool book.
This is a very, very cool book, and I am so curious. It's chapter 8 and chapter 7, and chapter 6. Chapter 6, 7, and 8. Chapter 6 is Gravity Beam Propulsion. Chapter 7 is Project Skyvault. And chapter 8 is Microwave Phase Conjugation. And
Hmm.
those three things, I know that he didn't like come up with this himself. I don't
No.
I mean, maybe he did, but damn, like, I need to know who his source was.
Yeah.
I can't find anything on this except for what he has in his book. And it's led me to accept, well, I started finding more stuff once I found a couple of the other scientists' names involved. One was a guy named Lake Marabou. It's Leikmyrabo.
Okay.
And he worked for NASA as a scientist, and was working on this thing called lightcraft technology. And they use a scheme called four-wave mixing. It's FWM, or four-wave mixing.
Okay.
And with these certain types of optical crystals, they can use four-wave mixing to change the speed of light or the refractive index in these materials. And if you can make that refractive index negative, you can actually, create these invisibility cloaks.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute, hold on. I thought the speed of light is not changeable. It's constant, right?
It well, yeah, it's actually you can change it's constant to all observers. That's what the law of relativity
Okay.
says. To
Ah,
all, it's constant to all observers, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's constant. It has to. So there's the difference between what's called phase velocity and group velocity, and so the group velocity is always constant. It's always c, but the
okay.
phase velocity can actually change.
Hmm.
So if you get the phase velocity to change, you can get it to go faster than the speed of light so that it goes into this material, it travels through that material and around your and outside around the craft and to the next right outside, so it makes you invisible to any light that comes in and hits your craft. And if you can become invisible to light, I think you might be able to become invisible to gravity, because I really believe that the photon is the carrier force particle for the graviton. Like
Hmm.
I said, like that, the graviton exists. If it's not, there's no graviton. We haven't found a graviton because the graviton is this sort of rippling motion of the electromagnetic medium that is in space. And
Okay.
those little subtle fluctuations, there's more of them between us and the Earth because there's lots of photons and electromagnetic interaction between us and what's underneath us, because there's a big giant Earth underneath us with
That's
lots of
kind of
atoms in it.
that's kind of what I believe as far as what gravity is. It's more of like Earth is a battery in a sense, got the north and the south pole, and then we ourselves are batteries, and everything has like a natural magnetism, that we are held down to the earth because it's got a pole. Now, it's you if that was true though, the north and south pole, if you go to Antarctica, it would we would propel ourselves away, right? Because we have like a
Well,
north south
it's not
south
quite
north.
like, I wouldn't
No.
say it's quite like magnetism.
No.
It's more like a distortion of the actual time of time itself.
Hmm.
If you look at it, there's a whole bunch of new videos that were put out. PBS Space Time is a great physics channel on YouTube that I watch a lot of their physics videos. He's got two recent videos on gravity, which talk about this time element, and I was just like, this is exactly, it's saying what I'm saying, but in a different kind of a different way, because it again, it's this interaction. If you take a photon in a box and bounce it, this is how they make an atomic clock: is they take a photon and bounce in a box, and they measure how fast it, every time it bounces and hits the ceiling is one time interval, and if you get a whole bunch of these photons going simultaneously, you can actually it actually like changes that time interval slightly to the other observers and elsewhere, because it's so much noise going on, and that time distortion actually changes is what like warps. We're not warping space; it's warping space time, but it's warping the time component of space time,
Hmm.
so that we fall
Interesting.
downwards. It's sort of weird. It's a lot to wrap your head around and stuff. But what I'm mainly concerned is how do we turn it off? How do we figure out a way to turn it off? So
Once it's turned on and we start going, phew, how do we stop it? Is that what you mean?
we talk, yeah, and no, I don't know how to. I don't care how to stop it. I just want to learn how to turn it on, and I'm not going to be inside the thing when I try it. It's going to be a drone first off,
Of
but
course, like Starship SN10.
right.
It almost made it.
One thing I wanted to go backtrack a little bit. We talked about
Sure.
this conferences, right? So
Yeah.
what we ended up doing is we ended up taking the like going through all those conferences, and I've accumulated lists of all these scientists. Like I said, over the
Mm-hmm.
years, I
Mm-hmm.
got a list of everyone who's ever worked on this stuff and their email, and so a lot of them I've reached out and contacted and asked questions and started a dialogue with these people, which is even cooler. And so eventually we got to this point a couple of years ago. We were all talking, and we like said, why don't we went to the Estes Park conference last year is what happened, and Estes Park conference is put on by a scientist named Dr. Jim Woodward, and it was famous for the Woodward effect, and so we invited all the attendees to our own conference, and we just started our own conference, and instead of having it once a year, we have them like almost weekly or bi-weekly now. And this is speeding it to, because the process of scientific advancement is like speeding up, it's been slow. It's been too slow and sluggish for years because it's gone through this process, these meetings once a year, or for these specialized fields. And if we can have them on the internet through Zoom conferences, it's way less expensive than flying everyone out to go to the conference.
True.
And we can have them, every week. So we kind of started our own conference. We did. I Tim Ventura, actually, we were trying to figure the perfect person to run it, and Tim Ventura kind of has already been doing this kind of stuff, and so we just wanted to like basically link up with him and start getting him better people, trying to find the best sources out there, and we don't. Not I'm saying all the sources that we have are the best sources so far. There's, but we're trying our best to like up the game constantly and get better people on. Of course, when you have a conference like this, there's going to be people that sneak their way in, and also people on the bad side that get their way in, that are trying to sabotage you and stuff.
Of course.
But this weekend should be awesome. We're having Paula Violette on.
Oh,
Who's
cool.
the author of this book. He's going to be presenting, so we're going to get to ask him questions firsthand. Like, where the heck did you get this information?
Like, who's your source?
Yes, like who told you about this? Like,
yeah,
for real. And also, we're gonna have a guy named Mike McCulloch on from Plymouth University, who's doing the M Drive stuff with DARPA.
Oh, cool.
And he's his website is called quantizedinertia.com, and you can check him out on that site and read some of his papers if you're interested in the physics and some of this stuff. And,
where can people watch this? Where is this going to be, this conference that you're doing?
It's going to be on Alien Scientists YouTube on Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and
right.
I'll be broadcasting it then. So tune in live there. You could probably also get it. No, just come to Alien Scientists. And watch it there. And if you have anyone that has any questions and stuff, this is like the best lineup one of the best lineups we've had so far. Probably the best. Just I've been dying to talk to Paul Laviolette and ask this guy questions, and his book was phenomenal and way ahead of its time. It's almost, it was 2008. So yeah, that's my YouTube channel. There's a video on there about how to make a real working magic wand.
Oh, that's cool.
Don't be careful with that. The retina's only a couple of cells thick, and if you burn out your rods and cones, they do not come back. So don't blind yourself with making this sort of stuff.
Right on. Well, you said rods and cones. Does that mean I could maybe fix my color blindness? I don't know. Maybe.
There's probably some technology to do that in the future, and I don't know much about it. But
yeah.
I don't know much about the medical stuff, but I'm more into the physics stuff. Why don't we talk a couple about this lightcraft technology? Remember, I was talking about that lightcraft and
right. Is it similar to like a light sail, or like what does it mean, lightcraft? What makes it lightcraft?
So they use like a microwave laser, and they blast it at this target, and it like creates a little impulse spark, which they can float the thing on. And this is interesting because this is also like, I don't know if have you ever heard of Project Bluebeam?
No.
Well, it's like there's a technology for creating displays in the air too, so that not only can they light up a little bit of air, they can also like draw in the air. So not only can they use it to like spark and propel this little craft, but they can also use it to draw pictures in the air with these 3D light displays. There's a company called Holovect that does some of this, and there's a couple other companies in Japan that do this as well. But it's basically a technology they could create like God coming down from heaven, or Jesus, and there was like a whole thing on this about like this, using this as a psychological operations weapon in wartime, because they could literally take a laser display and make do it over Vietnam and have Buddha come out the clouds, and everyone have all the soldiers drop to their knees right when they launch their attack or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were like literally considering this stuff for military applications and stuff. But
well, like you said, I mean, anything that isn't explained, is magic, or any sort of technology that you don't understand is magic. So it would be magic to them.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing that they can use it for is not only can they use it to propel this little like gimbal looking craft that they have. They have this little dish that they had in the experiments, but not only can they use it for that, but they can shine it on the leading edge of like a say that your airplane's flying along, enemy aircraft. So they could just energize the make this plasma on the leading surface of the right wing, right? And all of a sudden their right wing becomes lighter and they start banking to the left.
Yeah.
So you can use it to kind of like, there's a whole patent on it we have on using this technology to take control of aircraft and like manipulate their flight patterns with, and where to shine it on the wing to get the best results for this.
Okay. Well, that's got some implications.
So this is some crazy stuff, man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
it's just using like tools. It's just you give a scientist a bunch of tools and be like, all right, well, how can we use this in creative ways for warfare? And it's getting scary now, especially with drones
I
and
don't know that all scientists would instantly go to warfare, but I'm sure some are out there.
they're glad that I never that I went on the side of light to expose all this stuff rather than working for them, because the stuff that comes in my head, I'm like, oh no, it's bad.
I don't know if we should even go there.
No, we're not gonna. I'm
Good,
not gonna
good,
let
good,
no.
good, good. Let me ask you, do you believe in aliens?
Well, let me tell you, right? We're either all alone in the universe or there's life everywhere, and either one is equally as terrifying. That's
Answer
RBC
the
core.
question, sir. It's a yes or a no.
Um, I don't know, man. I don't really know.
You're
I don't have
you're
any
look at
evidence.
your
I can't
name. Look,
say
wait, where is
yes.
it? Look,
I
wait.
can't say yes. I believe
Look
in
at your name.
scientists.
It says
I
alien scientist.
I
What?
believe in scientists.
So what makes it alien then?
Well, alien can also mean, foreign. It can mean outside the box and outside the normal. It doesn't have to
Okay,
mean,
so that's what you're going for.
we come from France, or Mexico.
Okay.
No.
Or you are some sort of weird mixture between Tim Pool and Luke Rukowski
Right now. I did
wearing
it
a
on
Luke.
purpose for the show, man.
Did
It's
you?
funny.
It's like you melded them together and became an alien scientist, and
So, I know
that's
how to
funny.
assimilate with your culture quite well.
You're officially a podcaster now. Congratulations. It's funny.
So man, I don't know if I have some weird people tell me some weird stories, man. But there's a whole divide in ufology. It's really, there's a movie called Mirage Men, and I'm gonna
Okay.
be having one of the guys on from that. His name is Walter Bosley. I'm reading actually one of his books right now in preparation for getting him on the show.
Cool.
And Walter Bosley in the Mirage Men, they were talking about all these underground nuclear tests, which caused all this, which they wanted to test and monitor the radiation and the effects of the health that it was having on the local environment. So they were
Yeah.
taking cattle and removing the thyroid glands and then leaving them on the side of the road. So somewhere along the line, the people started finding all these dead cattle with their organs removed, and
Yeah.
started getting questions about it. And so the military started spreading, according to this, the military started spreading theories that aliens were doing it, so they wouldn't have to pay
Ah.
the ranchers for the cattle that they were taking to monitor, like the,
See, now
because what
that
happens
makes a
is,
lot more sense to me.
right. So like this is a whole thing. This whole cattle mutilation thing could have started from military starting rumors so that they didn't have to pay for cattle that were that they were taking and killing to to analyze their thyroid glands to test for the radioactive iodine uptake and to test for the radiation effects for these underground nuclear tests that they didn't want to tell the public about. So it kind of goes this full circle of you have the military, and then they talk about this other case with this guy named oh, what the heck was his name? Paul Benowitz. And Paul Benowitz would live next to an Air Force base, and he was filming all these test flights of these experimental aircraft and taking data on them, and he had all this signals and receiving equipment to kind of listen in and what was going on at the base, and he was super curious what was happening at the base. And I can't get the Tim Pool Rudkowski thing out of my head now.
It's pretty good, dude. People were saying it's Luke Pool. Hold on, there's a couple of good ones actually. Let me go back
It's
real
good.
quick.
It's funny, dude.
It's pretty good. We got Tuk Lul, Pulski. It's pretty funny. Milk Toast Alien Scientist Sitter. Very nice.
But
Good job, chat. Good
there
job,
was this
chat.
dude named Richard Doty, all right, who worked for the U.S. Air Force Counterintelligence Agency, and this dude's job for the Air Force was literally to go out and feed Paul Benowitz nonsense
Misinformation.
and disinformation,
Yeah, yeah.
and so they were tuned. They had NSA had tuned into his receivers, and they were beaming alien messages at him through his receivers. They were and. He was starting because this guy befriended him and started talking to him. He's like, well, "What if it was aliens? You know, it might
Yeah.
be aliens." And then they started sending him all this stuff to make him think it was aliens. And then he's like, and he went crazy and actually killed himself because he thought it was aliens.
Oh, geez.
And so yeah, it's a real story, and it's in this movie Mirage Men. You can go watch it for free on YouTube, and
I'm
it's
gonna look that
super
up
kind of
after.
interesting because like it shows you what lengths that the Air Force will go to just to confuse the public about what's really going on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of rumors that all the alien stuff and all these groups and people that push the alien stuff is actually works in favor of disinformation for the government because it's actually government programs and operations that are being disguised now as aliens so that people will think it's aliens, and it's a good cover. So that the cover up is not really that the government's covering up the evidence for aliens, is that they've been spreading these rumors of aliens to cover up for other programs, and then they don't want to admit to any of it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, of
And
course.
so that's the divide we have. So we get a couple divides. There's that one is whether it's aliens or whether the aliens are the government's cover story, or whether the government's covering for aliens and
Or
or what's
both.
the truth there, or whether it's
R-
both. Yeah,
Right.
because it could be both. Why not both?
I mean,
Um,
Roswell, do you think a craft landed there, or do you think it's just like some secret military,
I think
aircraft test,
I think with the Manhattan Project and all the secrecy, and they could have covered it up as long as it
Yeah.
wasn't that big. You know what I mean? They couldn't have, but they could have and covered it up with, you know, I believe. But the thing is, how would they, and then where would they? And I've done a lot of research into that. This guy UFOexplorations.com, Anthony Bragalia. I'm trying to get him to come on the show. He's been given a couple other interviews, and I've talked to him on the phone before. But he's done a lot of research into where that material went from Roswell, where it would have gone, these contracts between so eventually it went to Wright Patterson, according to a lot of these researchers, and that Wright Patterson held this stuff at a place called the Blue Room, which was their foreign artifacts storage facility for any kind of foreign artifact that was unidentified, and it would go to this Blue Room. It was called Senator Barry Goldwater tried to get access to that in the 80s or 90s, and was denied. And then they said that they said it didn't exist, and then they said it existed, but they destroyed everything. And then it's kind of they gave him the
Sure
runaround
they
on it.
did. Sure
But
they did.
apparently some of it went to the. I mean, if it was these alien metals, as they say, it had to have go to somewhere that could have analyzed that stuff. And the obvious contractor was Battelle in Ohio, which is they're like metallurgy experts. And so there's a couple guys that worked for Battelle. John Elroy Center said he was given some weird material at one point and told to analyze it, and he said he'd never seen anything like it, and it felt like he shouldn't have been holding it. Like it was just, he said it was that memory, again, that memory foil that a lot of these people talk about, and a lot of those Roswell witnesses mention and talk about.
Interesting.
Um, it's super interesting, and there's a lot of the debate going back and forth. I just tweeted out to the Skeptics Guide of the Universe because they were talking about this, and they said that there's studies on nitinol and memory metals going back 100 years, and I never came across anything that predates 1949. Is when Battelle started doing a lot of research on titanium alloys, allegedly for aircraft research, and they had like and but there are some interesting things that they did in there for analyze. The first report was a whole method for creating super pure titanium so that they could create these alloys. So they had to figure out a way to create super pure titanium, and methods for the metallurgy for creating super pure titanium. And then they had methods for analyzing titanium samples. And they talked a lot about these methods that they produced for analyzing various titanium samples. So it kind of hints at that they were, starting to investigate these things right around that time of Roswell. But again, there's no smoking gun. There's no like hard proof that's like, boom, oh, there's Roswell material, and they're working on it at government labs, for government contracts and trying to develop the technology and reverse engineer it. There's no smoking gun for that, and I've never found one. And believe me, we've been looking for quite a while. There's some interesting things like the guy who studied, who got the Nobel Prize for quasi-crystals, Daniel Shechtman, had done his postdoc at Wright-Patterson, and there's a lot of interesting research that's done at Wright-Patterson, and that's where U.S. Air Force Institute of Technology is, and NASIC, the National Aerospace Intelligence Center, are both right there. So it's seems like the place. If there were ever a place that this was going on, that would be the place for it.
Yeah.
But again, it'd be hard pressed to find anyone that knows anything that would talk. So, and again, the investigation continues, but we have this debate going on over that. First off, there's are aliens real, or is that just a cover up, or both, right? So then the next one is whether or not this technology was, because there's a debate going on with me and my friend Mark there, from the Falcon Space group down in New Jersey, and he seems to think like Michael Schratt and Stephen Greer and some of these other guys that the Nazis figured this out, and that Paperclip brought it to the U.S., and that they developed it in these Operation Paperclip under NASA with these Nazi scientists, and that there's been a secret space program since the 50s that's had anti-gravity technology, and this has all been just covered up and kept under the rug. So that's like that's whole one side of it over here, right?
Yeah.
And I'm over here like, no, with the mainstream physics and everyone that I'm talking to with these PhD scientists and stuff, gravity's a really hard problem, and no one has figured it out, and Einstein did write a lot of the theory that we've had to like work around, back 100 years. Yeah, it's a 100-year-old theory, but
Yeah.
it's not like, like these guys over here say that, oh, well, we can't go to space because some guy 100 years ago said so, and that's not really what I think is going on. It's more complex than that, and so that's why we have the lab now to test out these things, to actually build these things. So we have all these declassified documents now. I've been going after the science. So if it did exist back in the 50s and has been around since then, we have all like the scientific studies. We have like a lot of patents, a lot of stuff going back that far. Why don't we build it and see if any of it works?
Well,
And then if it,
what about you mentioned Stephen Greer,
yeah,
Dr. Greer. Have you seen his movie, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind?
I believe so. I believe I've
It's
seen it.
essentially it's about another dimension, like basically communicating with aliens. Essentially what he's alluding to in this video is that we can communicate with them if we basically find like it's through our mental power. Like we can
Hmm.
achieve almost like a DMT trip, but without drugs. It's like, because we can, if you call to them and we can connect to them on a different dimension through our the power that's within our mind. Essentially, it's a very interesting article, or video to watch. But that would, it's almost like what you said earlier, to you would have to beat gravity, and if you can go faster than light, rather, you can beat gravity. But if we can go to another dimension, that's essentially doing the same thing, isn't it? Right? I mean, it's very similar.
Well, first off, we should give that UFO a spin right there.
Okay.
Get it spun up.
I can't deny the alien scientists on a UFO spin.
But Stephen Greer, and I heard a lot about that interdimensionality, and that means a little bit different thing to me as a physicist,
Right.
and my understanding of
What does it
dimensions
mean
and
to you then?
dimensionality. I really think that if UFOs exist, UFOs, these things that people are seeing, I believe that they're physical. I
Right.
believe that, you know, they can't all be top secret programs of the U.S. because during World War II, those Foo Fighters, those balls of light, those clearly weren't ours or
Right.
anyone's at the time.
But what if these
Um,
UFOs are covered in, they figured out the outer casing, like you kind of imagined before about this, that bends light.
yeah, but
And if
how?
obviously
Yeah,
they are more advanced. Humor me though, like
yeah.
if they can travel faster than light, and that means they supersede gravity, like you kind of alluded to. If we could go faster than light, then gravity wouldn't affect them, those ships. That's why they can be like boop 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 boop
Yeah.
whatever, because gravity, they're just like, whatever, I'm just existing in this space. It almost feels like it's the same thing, like on a different, like there's the physical version of it and then the mental version of it. And just looking at it, it's they're very similar in a sense, where one is a physical representation of the physical realm, one dimension, and then a different dimension is, the mental side of things. I don't know if I
Yeah.
believe it, but
I know
I
there's a
could
lot of
see it though.
unanswered questions like that in science and like this consciousness stuff and people's, you know, I'm very skeptical of a lot of that stuff, like the remote viewing stuff. I'm a skeptic on. I don't.
Yeah.
I think that there's maybe something else to explain it. And then, of course, I'm a skeptic that Stephen Greer or anyone else can summon aliens with their mind and with their
Right.
thoughts too. I don't. I mean, that sounds crazy. Talk to me. And
I
and and
at first glance, I agree. It does sound crazy,
and then to
and
tell me like my mental energy and my states, my dimensions off, and that's why they won't appear for me because I'm a scientist and I'm have the wrong intentions when I'm summoning them, and that's their excuse
well, do you
too.
feel that people
It's
have
like,
auras though? I know this, we're kind of sidetracking a little bit, but I feel like it kind of. I'm just curious on, as you say, you're very science based. It seems like you're very logical based, also. That, but have you ever been around someone that you just can feel their mood is they're negative, like a negative energy from
yeah,
someone? You have.
yeah, you can feel it. I'm a different mood on any different. I'm like a strange animal. I channel a lot of different moods in any different
Yeah.
day and stuff. So like, I'll have bad energy one day and good energy the next. I
Well,
guess that's
isn't
sort of
that the
what I
same
chant.
thing
What
though?
I'm
Well, like what's how does that differ?
Yeah, I don't know. It's some of it's body language. I feel a lot
Okay,
of
I could
it's
see that.
intuitions and stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, like I love that guy Darren Brown and his explanations of a lot of this stuff because he understands like NLP and human emotions and these sort of things like really well. That kind of these triggers and these subtle triggers and stuff that um, and understands the human mind and how because he's an illusionist,
yeah.
and it's like magic, the kind of magic like that. It's illusions, and it's easy to fool people with. We're easy to fool. I mean, that's
Yeah,
a
I could see
fact.
that.
But
I could see
so
that.
I don't know. I'm skeptical of all that, and I'm skeptical that anyone, that the CIA did anything with mind control and remote viewing, spies, other than trying to convince people that it was real so that they can get inside their heads. Because if you believe that, there's spies out there that can, remote view everything you're doing right now and see everything and know everything about you just without any actual intelligence collection, it's kind of a scary thought, and
Agreed.
it would definitely mess with your mind if you believe that. And I think that that's what a lot of it was about, is getting the Russians to believe that we were doing this and that we were having success with it. And but there's not really much evidence for that because we still have you talk to anyone in the intelligence business and be like, what do you about their methods and sources? And I doubt that remote viewing is one of the methods and sources that they use to collect actionable, real world, verifiable, hard intelligence.
Yeah.
Because it's just basically you're using your imagination and guessing with your mind. And sometimes it's your intuition's very good, and like there's been these experiments that have been done where it's there's some strange results and stuff with that. But
So do you
does
think
that
that that's what Dr. Greer is basically, for lack of better words, grifting and letting and selling the idea and basically convincing people that they're seeing these things? Because in the documentary you see these pictures of light traveling around these people, and it's like, I've seen ghost adventure stories, or that where they take pictures and there's the light balls, which I think is just energy that's in the air that happens to be um, caught on the camera. But you know, essentially, if it is body language, if it is manipulation, um, I don't know. It just feels
huh,
like, if
I'm
it's not
curious.
real, I
I
don't know.
heard that he was dropping flares from helicopters and like and
Have you
scamming people
really?
according to so there's people out there accusing him of running a scam with the whole operation and stuff too,
Really?
to that level. I mean, and I don't know because there are people out there on the other side of this that are so desperate not to not make to that nobody should believe in this stuff that they spread things that aren't true sometimes. So you have
Yeah.
to like yeah, I don't know. I have to go with the evidence is where I say it's like, all right, well,
I like the evidence.
let me try this on my own a couple times, and I've done it, and it didn't work. And
You tried to conjure aliens?
yeah, I sat there. Why not? I said, hey, this is what you could do, and it will work. So why
Hmm,
not? Let me try it a couple times. I
cool.
did, and I had a
Nothing.
friend told me, oh
Nothing.
no, you have to keep doing it. He said, I did it. I sat there all day and did it for 24 hours straight, and then it eventually happened that night. And I was like, I don't have the patience of the time.
I don't have
Like,
the
I'm
time for
sorry,
that.
dude. Like, I don't know. I really feel like the way that we need to discover aliens is not by meditating and them showing them to ourselves as balls of light. It kind of has to go into a progression. I feel like China's got to go find water on the moon or an artifact on another planet, or so it's got to start with something like like that before we find the actual aliens like that Vulcan moment from First Contact
Yeah.
or anything. I think it's going to be like it's got to be like water on another planet first, and then
Finding the obelisk on the moon.
finding that. Yeah, so it's got to be something like that like it happens first, and then that's how I feel. It has to go through this progression, and that's my prediction of what it's going to go through. I don't feel like there's going to be like, oh, disclosure, and the whole thing too is with disclosure and all this. So my colleague wants to take this approach where it's like, oh, let's it's already been discovered and all we have to do is rediscover it, or all we have to do is put a petition together to beg the government for declassification.
Yeah.
This report that's coming out in 180 days that I guarantee it won't tell me anything that I didn't already
It's not
know.
going to be anything. That's what I think. When I heard that, I was like, this is very
Bro,
cool, but these videos that they're showing us now are terrible.
if you
Little
want to
like
learn more about these
grainy.
programs, go to my channel and I'll teach you more about these programs than you'll
Is that
ever
Alien
learn.
Scientist
Yeah,
on
yeah, alien
YouTube?
scientist.
I actually added it to the description below. So in the description below, you can find how to follow Jeremy here, Alien Scientist on YouTube, Twitter. I also have a couple websites that you asked me to add in there. So you can definitely go check him out. Definitely go follow him. He delves much more into this and more. Just looking at some of your videos, it's like you get into some serious stuff here. What's
Yeah,
this?
man, I'm
You have
trying
an
to.
open letter to Dr. Stephen Greer. What's that all about?
Oh, so
I haven't seen it.
Steven,
But
I posted that. It turned into a stream, so it went on a lot longer than I had expected. People were like, oh, an open letter should be like 10 minutes, so
not two
it's like
not 2 hours and
2 hours
49 minutes.
and 40. Yeah, so I messed up there, and I don't think I'll even watch it because he's blocked me on Twitter and a couple other things because I've
Well,
asked too many. I asked too many questions.
yeah,
But he's it was basically about Orion Project because he had started with Disclosure Project. He had started another disclosure project called Orion Project, the
yeah.
Orion
I've heard of
Project,
this. Yeah,
and it
I
was
don't know.
just for scientists supposedly, and it was for free energy and anti gravity. And
Okay, you're like I'm about that. So
I'm about that, and I was like, so this is kind of what we're doing now with this conference at altpropulsion.com. That's the conference that Tim Ventura set up with American Anti-Gravity at americanantigravity.com /events to keep up with the events that we're doing and the people that we're talking to. We're reaching out basically to the community and trying to get these scientists on. And some of them are still under oath, like Lake Marabou, for example. He's under a security. He's got a security classification or a gag order. He can't talk until 2024. So we got to wait until 2024. But as soon as that expires, man, we're gonna get that dude on. We're gonna talk to him.
cool.
We're basically taking these people that are like now 80 or 90 years old, a lot of them, and they're getting old now, and they have a lot of knowledge, a lot of information to share about these things that they could never talk about their entire careers. And we're getting them to come out of the woodwork and share this information. And I think this is doing more for disclosure right now than that 180 pages is doing because it's really getting at the core of this, which is the research that your tax dollars have paid for that
We're
you
not
never
even
even
allowed
knew
to know.
about.
Yeah, we're not even allowed to know. Right. So I have some questions from my locals channel. If you want to get into my locals, you can go to my locals, adamcastirl.locals.com. I always have, whenever I have interviews, I always post up for supporters only. what you want to ask my guest, and I have a couple different questions I'm going to send your way. This is from Dark Helmet. He says, "What possible different from us chemical makeup life forms could we encounter?" So, asking about obviously aliens that we may encounter out in space. What do you think? I guess we'll just go with what do you think the first alien life form? I think it's going to happen
So,
eventually, whether or
so
not
like
it's sentient. I mean,
all the life forms on Earth are carbon based. So there's thoughts about silicon based life forms as well. I think that's like the only other thing you could basically build that can build chains long enough to create proteins that would be able to produce life.
chat's
So
on it.
there's
They're going silicon based life.
not
Chat's in
silicone,
with it.
silicon.
Silicon, no, right? Silicon.
Silicone based life would be fun too.
Right,
So,
right.
but silicon based life. But most things are made out of carbon because carbon's like awesome at forming chains. It's really great at sticking together and forming really long, stable chains of molecules, which are necessary for producing DNA and coding structures. What's interesting, I think that there might be aliens on the Earth. If aliens came to Earth, billions of years ago, they might have left what's called the gene drive. They could have inserted information through genetics in what's called a gene drive, so that like you can literally take DNA and write the CDs and AGs as computer code, and you could basically create a drive or store a bunch of information and then insert it as latent DNA into some tree or some animal, and just and it would be there, and come back into a couple trees and then come back there so that it would be there. So there might be aliens. There's a theory that there might be extraterrestrial like life on Earth, just in the form of these gene drives hidden in latent DNA inside of ancient species of trees or reptiles or alligators or sharks. Maybe those are the two oldest, right? So
Interesting. Yeah, there's
one
like
of
a
the
600-year-old shark right now in the Arctic, which is pretty cool, or 500-year-old or something like that. It's pretty
but
insane.
I meant like billions of years that they've been
Oh,
on the
okay, okay.
planet. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So not just the aged lifespan of the individual organism, but the actual the species of itself. So like ginkgo biloba is like one of the oldest trees on the planet, and it
Mhm.
also interestingly has the longest DNA chain, I believe, of almost anything that they know of.
Really?
Um,
That's cool.
so if you were to look for a gene drive, ginkgo biloba might be that would be a place I would start if you're going to start, trying to decode alien computer code language that's written in DNA.
Yeah,
Uh, but
that's cool.
I thought that was interesting too, and it kind of relates to that question about other forms of life and aliens and there's lots of speculation that's been done, and I know that Discovery Channel's had a number of shows on showing the weird types of aliens and other alien worlds,
Yeah,
and
I
talks
like those
about
shows. I like
those are
those
cool.
shows. This
That's
one's from the grad. He says, "Are you here legally now?" Because you're an alien scientist. Yes, he's here legally, grad. Thanks for asking. C.S. Cooper says, "How
C.
do we warp drive, or how do we do warp drive as about the white Jude warp interferometry experiment?"
Yeah, so the white Jude, that was one idea for how to produce warp drive, and there's been a number of different types of warp drives. Alcubierre started it in 1994 with that paper on the warp drive theory based on Star Trek. Really, he used Star Trek as a motivation to write the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a bunch of research by a guy named Bernard Haish of Caltech, and he was contracted by Lockheed Martin for a number of years to do a lot of research on inertia and what inertia was, and 0 point energy, and sort of these fields and UNRWA radiation and a couple other concepts. And he worked with a guy named Hal Puthoff. Interesting individual. Then another number of people wrote papers on this subsequent. Sonny White of NASA is working on the white Alcubierre white warp drive as well. There's a channel called Asteron X that does like a lot of videos on these types of warp drive stuff. They're pretty cool to check out for that. But So there's a number of different people working on warp drive experiments. There's a couple different companies, including Tachyon Aerospace over in, I think it's the UK, and Robert O'Keefe's been on a number of our conferences and chats and even private chats with us. And he says that he can't talk about it yet, but this stuff exists and that it's coming out very shortly. It's going to be coming out in the next couple of years. That they already have craft and everything, but you don't know. You never know whether to believe these guys or not, man.
Cool.
But I definitely it sounds cool to me, and I'm I'm all for it, and I almost believe it with the amount of technology and stuff that's come out in the last 4 years. Um, it's been a lot to keep up with, man, even for me being directly involved in it. So like if you're trying to come to this now, man, and you want to see that there's evidence for this out there, man. I hope you're ready.
I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it. All right, we got some super chats I want to read. Hydra says, "Have you read The 12th Planet by Zachariah Sitchin? And if so, what are your thoughts on it?" I have not. Have you?
I have not. I think I've heard of this Zachariah Sitchin fellow. He's one of those theorists that create like start a lot of these, alien origins and ancient origins and stuff. I think, right? Is that if I'm not mistaken?
I'm not sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't speak to that more. I'm not familiar with it.
That's all right. That's all right. Black Magic says, "I saw one time I saw Tim Pool ride the fence so hard that the fence cried out for lube. Effing chance for the poor fence." Ian Crossland, heyo. Ian Crossland coming in with a super chat says, "Epic confluence of minds." That sounds like an Ian Crossland comment. Thank you, Ian, for that super chat. What up?
I can't wait to have Ian on my stream or go on
Ian
Ian's
is
cast.
great. I saw him in chat earlier, and I tried to act. I said, "Yo, Ian, like, come join us." Because
For real?
honestly,
Dude, just
yeah, like,
jump
why
in,
not?
dude.
Like,
Come
Ian,
on.
Ian could have come down and just jumped. Although I don't know how to. I couldn't swap cameras because we're on StreamYard, so I only have the one camera. But he could have. I mean, whatever. I would have scooted over and we could have switched to this scene, and it could have been me and Ian talking to you. So
Dude,
it's all right. All right. Ian's great.
Ian's the reason we're talking right now.
That is true. Ian is the reason we are talking. Ian is great. He was on my show a couple weeks back, and he's always welcome back. I don't know if you're still watching, Ian, but you're always welcome on my show. He's great. Friendly Neighborhood Sawyer says, "Neanderthals unite. P.S. SN10 still landed, though. It did land. Did you watch the landing yesterday?"
Yeah, I thought it was gonna blow up right when that flame came out the back, and it was
Yeah,
like going up
as
the
it was
side.
coming down, I mean, it started flaming out the side. It's like, ooh, that doesn't look good. But it was slow,
Wait
and
for
it
it.
actually kind of like bumped to the ground. It was like, poof. It was like, ooh.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, it didn't
And
explode.
even after
I was
it bumped,
like,
yes! I'm like waiting
Woo!
for it to like blow up right there
Yeah.
on the launch pad right after it dropped. And
Yeah, and then the water, they were like, okay, obviously it's on fire still. Something's not okay.
No.
So, yeah, it was cool
more
to watch.
bugs to work out still, but
They're working them out, man. I'm excited. See, Alex Birch says, "Alien, I'm counting on you." Right on, right on.
yeah, thanks, man. Yeah.
Sejong the Great. "Gravity isn't mysterious. It's based on nuclear density. It's absolutely tied to electron count and electron to nucleus bonding. That's why planet density, not size, determines gravity." That makes a lot of sense. All right. Thank you, Sejong. Always coming in hot with those really nice, informative super chats. Thank you. That Simple Note says, "Completely off topic, but what is your favorite hentai?" I don't watch hentai. Sorry. It's
like
anime porn. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Cool. Storm, thank you for that super chat. Chapter Master Dante says, "Aliens come from France. Was that a Kung Pao Enter the Fist reference?" Is that? Do you know
It
that?
was Coneheads.
Coneheads. Oh, classic.
Dan Aykroyd, yeah.
Aging yourself. Not a lot of people know about Coneheads. I know about them Coneheads.
Remember they giving beer out for Halloween? That was great, man.
Giving beer out for Halloween. Wow, I remember that. I also got. You ever get rolls of pennies? I used to get rolls of pennies, random.
Never
Never? You've never got rolls of pennies?
got rolls of pennies for
It
Halloween.
was such a
no.
shame. I was always like, poof, and because it's heavy too. You're like, great, thanks.
weighing me
$1
down, slowing
in
me down on
pennies.
my mission, man.
You're lazy. Clay Moore, hello, fellow scientist, asked this once. Ever think of doing the experiments outside due to the field dynamics and how it's different from the interior to exterior, i.e., Wardenclyffe, Tesla's lab? Hmm. I wonder what experiments you were talking. What were we talking about? That could have been experiments, and
Well, the
hmm.
anti-gravity experience, maybe it won't work inside the garage. Like according to Ralph Ring and Otis Carr, the first one they built like flew through the ceiling and they never saw it again. So
Seriously?
I don't believe their story to be true. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't seen any evidence for it. It's been decades and stuff, and so I don't really know. And the guy claimed that he was a protege of Tesla and that he knew Tesla, but there's no evidence of that. And
Huh.
it's interesting. There's a lot of interesting stories out there and stuff about what happened to Tesla and that Tesla had all these ideas first, and or that there was another guy even further. I just learned this last night. I still have to dive into this fellow, so I don't even know where to find his name. I can't even find it right now. But
That's
there's
all
some
right.
other 17th century
Oh,
philosopher apparently
way back.
that figured out all this stuff way back when. And so I got to go through and there's all these claims out there, and then I got to go and investigate them and see if there's any like legitimacy to it. And it's always
Random
fun.
thought. I did a dive on Tesla. I really liked Tesla a lot. He was obsessed with the pyramids in Egypt. What are your thoughts on those pyramids? What do you think they are?
So if I could go anywhere in the world and for a visit, I would go to the pyramids. It's
Me
been on
too.
my list. It's like number one on my list
Me
of
too.
places I have to see
Number
before I
one.
die. Like
Absolutely.
because I just want to see them for myself. Like, were these things could this thing have been built like the way they said it was, or
Yeah.
because is there anything to those crazy George Tsoukalos theories where he's trying to explain, like anyways, 2.5 million blocks cut out of, it's on a quarry. There's a lot of arguments in both directions for for me. It's like, I guess maybe, but then I go and think about hiring a contractor even just to repair the pyramids to their original condition now, and how much it would cost and whether it would even be possible.
Yeah.
And um and then there's books out there that have these ideas about that they were energy sources or
That's
other
what
things.
Tesla
There was a
believed.
Yeah, that's what Tesla thought originally,
Yeah.
right? And there's another book by a guy named Christopher Dunn. I read that in like high school, and it's been around for a while. And he's another big proponent of these ancient, that the pyramids are much older and that they were a power plant or some other type of, structure built by
Energy
aliens. And
emitters, essentially taking the telluric current and basically harnessing it and then sending it out in basically the Wardenclyffe tower that Tesla built, was using that technology that he researched from the pyramids. At least that's what I've come to believe myself.
is that the
I want to
original
feel it.
notebooks? Is
I
that
want to
like
feel that
original
energy
notebooks, or is that like some,
through
new
Tesla.
age author who wrote that years
I'm not
later?
sure where that
This
I
is
when I was prepping for my Tesla deep dive, I there was so many different. I watched a few different documentaries,
mm,
writing down notes throughout the different things that I found. So I'm not sure exactly where I found out, but I know that he went to Egypt as a younger. He was in his like early 20s, and he really was like obsessed with the pyramids, like trying to understand them.
hmm.
And through my through a completely different documentary that I watched about the pyramids themselves, I know that they were built above an aquifer, and the Nile used to be 50 miles west along the pyramids, and the water would go into the aquifer and come out, and the way that that's the same way that the Wardenclyffe Tower was built, with above an aquifer in the same sense, near water. And it was just
Flowing
kind of,
water underneath, right?
well,
It's
yeah, it
flowing,
wasn't, but
yeah.
it wasn't in water because
Was it an aqua, like a still body of water underneath it, or
no,
a
no,
flowing water?
it would flow in as like with the tides kind of thing. Like the
Oh,
tides would bring it in and then come out, and something to do with the telluric current. which is when the sunlight essentially is hitting the Earth, because the Earth is rotating and the sun is beaming light. The very front of that line of light as it hits, it's kind of pushing this. It's called the telluric current. I love that term, and it's the
Yeah.
energy from that first sun that's just being pushed around the Earth. So this aquifer system would basically pick up on all of that electricity, and because the water was in at that moment, I don't know, something along that lines. Like there's a lot I'm missing. I feel like I'm butchering it, but it was very very intriguing to
That's
know. So I
interesting.
think that they're basically energy emitters that don't work anymore because
I think
the
I read some of that stuff, some of the same stuff, because I was reading a thing that was talking about poltergeist activity in houses and how they this guy did a study on all the poltergeist houses and found that they were built over running aquifers. That there's
ah
like water going underneath the house somewhere, and that somehow this causes some effect which creates these poltergeist activity, like
yeah. See,
the
that's what
items to
I.
be thrown across the room or off the wall and stuff
It's because it's
randomly.
electric energy.
Some kind of energy. I don't know
Yeah,
if it's
so that's
purely
what I well,
electric
like.
or.
We talked about it earlier. The balls of light in the pictures. Um, there was a study that was done on a lot of different ancient structures, and this is found in South America, in the Yucatan Peninsula. There's like where the Mayans built their pyramids, because there's pyramids all over the planet, and the study was essentially taking pictures at night and throughout the 24-hour day cycle, and at certain points of the time right before the sun came up, the balls of light were very very prevalent, and and it's always around these pyramids, and all of them were built above aquifers, all of them. Like, what? Some of the later ones that found, like out in India, there's a couple that were built later on, but not to the same specifications. You could tell that they were much further down the line, and they were people trying to emulate the big pyramids. But it's interesting to find out that there's pyramids all around the world that are built above the same aquifer systems, built very similarly, that all have that electrically charged nature right before the sun comes up, which is it's just really cool. I really like the thought of free energy back in the day. I mean, supposedly the Egyptians had light bulbs, and if they had energy
Right.
emitting from the pyramids, those light bulbs would all just light up at night. It's cool to think about.
Fascinating. But yeah, again, I would love to come
See
up
it?
with an experiment that I
I
can
know.
do, like to say, all right, well, this is what's going on, and
Yeah, yeah,
now I can take this away and then see if it still happens, and add to it until I come up with the exact recipe, and then translate that into physics and math, and then I can publish it in a journal, and
yeah,
other scientists can say, yes, this is what's going on. And
yeah. If only we were allowed to study them, and the Egyptian government not allowed to study them anymore, unfortunately. All right, let's say
yeah.
RJ, thank you for that super chat. Sejong the Great again says almost any version of warp drive that involves propulsion would shoot radioactive matter like a shotgun into its destination. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, Archaeos, thank you for that super chat. Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker, thoughts on Ning Li, physicist who discovered a gravity anomaly in the 90s. DoD hired her and she was never seen again. Some say she cracked gravity. Thoughts?
Right. Yeah. Ning Li was, she worked with a guy named Douglas Torr, NASA Huntsville in Huntsville, Alabama. And that was back in like the 90s. They were replicating this experiment by a Russian scientist named Eugene Podkletnov. And it was with rotating superconductor disks that were having these gravitomagnetic anomalies, or impulse anomalies, as well as in these devices purportedly. Um, she created a company called AC Gravity Ltd. And then and then left NASA. Um, the last I think I heard that rumors that she went to China for a while, and was working for the Chinese government. But I think I found I we finally actually tracked her down, and she works for Applied Materials out in California right now
Okay.
currently. And so
So she hasn't been disappeared.
She hasn't been disappeared. No. She kind of made a bunch. She made a bunch of claims that were about gravity, and that she had a theory on gravity and stuff, and it got a lot of attention and spotlight and stuff back in the day. And I think she she hid out for a while just to get away from that.
Yeah, the
Really
heat.
is what I think happened, because when you just do this kind of stuff in the scientific community, it can mean your job and your future sometimes.
Right.
So I think that's more of what happened than that from what I've researched. Then she went into a secret project with this stuff. I don't know of too many people that are doing the research related to that Podkletnov experiment and anything that it's gone anywhere. And we have a couple more experiments that we're still waiting. We're going to do that we want to do just to be absolutely sure that it's that there's nothing there. But as of right now, it looks like that was like some kind of cold. There's a lot of stuff that we might have been Cold War games of just like disinformation that counterintelligence put out to confuse the Russians,
Right.
and for the Russians putting out to confuse us. And it looks like this is. I haven't quite put it fully in that bin yet, but it's pretty much on its way there right now with what I've seen from it. Because the NASA spent a lot of time researching this, and I haven't heard too much about anything come out of this. There was a rumor about the TR-3B, that flying triangle craft, which used rotating mercury and like a superconducting rotating mercury that would create the same kind of effect, a large ring of rotating mercury plasma and stuff.
Cool.
And then those theories kind of go back to the Nazis with the Nazi Bell stuff on rotating mercury and stuff. And we might put together an experiment with some rotating mercury. It's quite dangerous and hard to to handle, and toxic and everything else, which just makes me not want to do the experiment even more, and make me think that it's just one of those perpetual time wasting machines, because there's nothing in the scientific literature that tells me why I should be doing this, or that
Right.
there's any reason to be. It's just a bunch of stories as far as I've found, and I try to like separate that stuff out as best I can, because that's can't completely throw it away or discount it, but it's something I've been chasing for 10 years, and I'm like pretty much ready to give up on, because of all this stuff I found with the optical materials, four-wave mixing, phase conjugation, and nonlinear optical materials, and these types of mirrors, and that they're and what they can do with light in these materials, and how they can bend light and warp the fabric of space-time using light and lasers as well. So we talked about electrically charging, using electrostatic fields to charge and ionize air to move it out of the way of the craft and stuff. You can also use microwaves, and there's a whole patent on blasting the air in front of your craft with microwaves to create supercavitation in this open. It literally opens up the air, so there's no air in the way of your craft, in front of your craft, so you can
Wow.
fly. You can fly through the air with laminar flow, and there's no air resistance or
Wow.
turbulence that's created, and they can go like this is on all these craft. There's they're drones for right now. I don't think they have any manned craft that are doing this, but they have drones that are Mach 6 plus that use these skin coatings. And
Wow.
Battelle, that company I said, has been like the suspect for the ones that have the alien stuff, because they've been a private institution, a contractor for the military, but they're an institution, and they've existed since 1938, and they currently manage all the national labs in the country, which is crazy. It's like all
Oh,
the research that gets done is like managed by Battelle. That's like a red flag for any kind of like keeping tabs over all the research that we're doing in the
yeah,
country.
yeah.
Like, and the worst part is they're unreachable by FOIA, because they're not a government entity. They're a private corporation. So you can FOIA these people all day for records on Roswell or metals that were recovered and stuff, and they don't have to give you crap.
Oh man. Interesting. I want to know more.
Yeah, so that's some interesting stuff. But Battelle got the contracts for those Mach 6 plus craft, and it makes sense why they'd get the contracts, because if they've had pieces of alien debris that use this type of technology, they're going to be the ones who know the most about it.
True that. True that.
But so there's lots of rumors. There's no like hardcore proof yet, but man, we just got to keep pushing for it. I think in another 5 years, this thing's gonna bust
Oh
wide
yeah.
open.
Oh, I can't wait. That simple note says that last one was a joke, chat. But my serious question is, how would you feel some sort of entity like the Iron Giant from the movie showed up? That's interesting. A
What's
big, huge metal robot. I'm
I,
here
a,
now.
a big, huge metal robot?
Well, you've seen the Iron Giant, right?
I don't think I've seen the Iron Giant.
So
I
the
don't know what he's talking about. I'm
spoiler
thinking,
alert. Spoiler. I'm gonna spoil the movie for you. Are you okay with
uh,
it?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so spoiler alert out there, Iron
Let me look
Giant
this.
fans or whoever wants to see this movie. So it turns out he was sent there to destroy Earth, and he got his head knocked when he landed. Befriended a human. It was a young kid, and they became friends. And then I don't know. The military was like trying to get him, and so he kind of had some like memory lapses, started attacking the military because they were attacking him, and then through, the kid like convinced him that things were, and then they lived happily ever after. So that's basically what it is. But it was a huge giant alien robot killing machine sent here to take out Earth by itself, which it probably would have been able to do if it was didn't get damaged on the way. But that would suck. That simple note. My
Yeah,
thoughts on it. That would suck.
yeah, that would suck. I don't know. I can't speak for intention. For of aliens and intention. It's like obviously, if there's aliens out there, they're very subtle, as Elon Musk said. They're quite
Mm-hmm.
subtle.
Yeah.
Um, so far, anyway. Technologically wise, I don't think we're going to have Independence Day type attack because it's like doesn't make sense that they'd have to come here for our resources because
Right.
you know or space balls, right? They don't coming for the air. Hydrogen and oxygen are like some of the most abundant molecules in the
Yeah, they
entire
could find it
universe.
everywhere.
They could find it anywhere,
Right.
everywhere, and there's plenty of gold and precious metals on asteroids. They don't have to come here.
Yep.
And the whole theory of that that we're slaves on a mining colony that discreetly run by aliens, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, that we're just here to pull all the gold out of the ground, and the aliens are just
Stargate.
going to come down and take it, and yeah.
I
So,
love that movie Stargate as a kid.
so I don't know. I guess time will play out and see for that notion. I like to just think like assume we're the only ones here, assume that we're all alone, and that the chance of just assume that every single intelligent alien civilization out there dies off in this stage right here. That we're in that zone right now, waiting for that. The great filter. This is called the great filter in that Drake equation, and
We
just
must
assume that
pass through.
we're in it. We must pass the great filter right
We got
now,
to
and
do
that
it.
we're the only ones. Just assume that we're the only ones.
We're so close.
Assume that the government doesn't know anything, and they're not going to tell you anything. So don't put all your eggs in the basket for disclosure and hope that the government's going to disclose stuff. The work has to be
We won't.
done by us. It has to be done, ourselves. And I really don't think it can come from an institution or the government because historically the breakthroughs in science and the breakthroughs in these types of things have never ever come from the institutions. They had a well-funded a group of scientists and engineers working against the Wright brothers to build the first powered flight aircraft. And who won that? Who won that race? It was the guys in the bicycle shop who were the underground, do-it-yourselfers
Yep.
and the grassroots guys that had the drive to actually do it because they weren't the ones just doing it for the money to get paid. They weren't the hired pro engineers. They had the spirit and they had the soul, and that's what it required.
Spirit
And
will win. Yes.
the spirit will and
I
the
like it.
drive to do this will defeat any opposition and any skepticism and anyone who says that we can't have a warp drive and that we can't get off this planet and can't go to and live in a Star Trek universe in the future where we don't have politicians and we don't have driver's licenses or any of that crap, man. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe I'm being a
Yeah.
little too extreme, but
That's all right. That's all right. Chaos, thank you for that super chat. Lucky Luckadoo says, please ask if launching off planets could possibly offset the precise orbit of the planet. Single launch, fine, but does it matter and who is measuring? It's a good question. People have
well,
asked that.
all right. So, the ratio of the mass of the, a craft versus the mass of the entire Earth. Let's do some numbers real quick just to see like how much we would have, how much mass of the, how much a percentage. So the mass of the Earth, right? Mass of the Earth. Let's look that up. Get a number for this. All right, it's quite large. It's almost 6 times 10 to the 24th kilograms, right? So in order to even touch a fraction of that, you're going to have to be in the ballpark of, even a 10,000th of that, right, is going to be 10 to the 18th,
Yeah.
right? Kilograms. Think of how much that is and how big your spaceship's going to be to have like an effect on this.
So we don't
You're
have
talking about
spacecrafts.
negligible.
Okay.
You're talking about negligible. Even the amount of rockets we're launching and stuff, it's negligible if you talk about the physics, because it's all based on conservation and momentum and stuff, and just the mass of the Earth is just way too huge for any little spacecraft to have an effect on that. Even over time, a cumulative effect, maybe even over thousands of years. But I mean, once we get to this point where we're in space and we can do all this stuff, we're going to have other things to worry about, because the sun's expanding. We need to move our Earth further away from the sun,
Yeah.
out into space, so that it can stay in the Goldilocks temperature zone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's other issues we're going to have to worry about: global warming, or climate change, or whatever you want to call it. We probably need things that can control the weather more accurately, and also help us. Like if we had ways to heat up Texas a couple weeks ago when it was going through that freezing wave, we could have just heated up Texas or taken some heat from somewhere else. And I don't know, there's different technologies that could exist.
Just move the weather around a little bit.
Have mirrors in space. This is basically what you have to do. A bunch of mirrors in space, so you just shine more sunlight on certain areas, or
They
take
are working
sunlight away
on
from certain areas.
they are working on solar arrays that will be kind of like solar farms that will sit in geosynchronous orbit and kind of beam energy down.
Yep.
I don't see why that wouldn't have been able to be used in this situation.
Same
Sending
idea,
more heat.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what we will have, I believe, in the future, if we become like Starship Troopers or Star Trek, anything beyond, hopefully not Star Wars, living under a galactic empire,
Yeah. Hopefully not, right? Chaos says, "Who's Ginkgo Balboa? Rocky's brother? Bilboa? What was the name of that tree that you referenced earlier?
Yeah, the ginkgo tree.
The ginkgo tree.
Ginko.
What was the full name of it?
It's Ginkgo bilboa,
Bilboa.
Bil.
Ginkgo
Um,
Bilboa.
yeah,
Where's
Ginkgo
that tree
bilboa.
at? Where's that? Where's that? Madagascar? That would
No,
be my
they're
guess because
all
they've got
around.
all
You'll find them. You've probably seen them. They have leaves like this.
Oh yeah, that looks familiar actually.
This is their fruits. They're these little things.
That's cool.
They turn yellow.
Pretty. Cool. I like that.
There's one in Asia.
Oh.
Real pretty.
Oh wow, look at that color. That's a great color.
Definitely.
Sejong again says, Adam, if you're curious about the effects of water and atmosphere, the idea of moving objects, and the concept of Foo Fighters, look up St. Elmo's fire.
Oh, yeah. And ball lightning, too, right? So ball lightning, another interesting phenomenon, not well understood, not well explained, but apparently, like when lightning hits the ground, a real high electrical energy lightning discharge will send some silicon molecules from sand or dirt up into the air, and it creates this exotic vacuum object, or somehow traps the electromagnetic the lightning in a ball, and it can actually travel. And what was really interesting about this, ball lightning has been observed, it will travel through a window pane.
Wow.
And then when it dissipates with this blast, it dissipates with a blast, and then it leaves behind whatever material was stuck inside it.
Wow.
So this ball lightning strikes the ground. The lightning strikes the ground. It it vaporizes the dirt or whatever to create this silicon vapor, which then goes up into the air and somehow traps these fields in this vapor. I think through like one of these vortexes. It's similar to, if you look up flying magnetic donut pulses, believe it or not. There's a bunch of science on these flying magnetic donut pulses, and they're also called spatiotemporal optical vortices.
Cool.
And it's a way that light gets trapped in a torus or a ring, like a smoke ring, and it's self-perpetuating. It's sort of like this wave that's self-perpetuating in around the ring of the torus. And so I'm thinking that maybe this is how this silicon vapor gets trapped from the ground in this sort of exotic vacuum object. But the weird thing that I can't explain is why it can go through a solid pane of glass, then dissipate on the other side and drop the silicone. So it took this dirt, put it in this object, transported it through the glass,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
weird.
dropped it in the room without harming the glass.
It's pretty cool.
Like
That's pretty cool.
so it's like almost like a warp drive. It's like
Never thought of
if
that
you think
before.
about it, right? If you think
Mhm.
about if we can understand what is going on in that ball lightning to
Yeah.
produce that,
The secrets
can
of
we
warp
can
drive.
we might be able to go walk through walls. How
Cool.
do we know? You know, it's crazy to think about. But hey, maybe it's all nonsense. Maybe these stories are just they have no basis in fact. But
I also have St. Elmo's fire here. It says St. Elmo's fire is a weather phenomenon in which luminous plasma is created by a corona discharge from a sharp or pointed object in a strong electric field in the atmosphere. Interesting. Cool.
oh, okay, yeah. So this is like the glow. So when the during an electric storm, you start becoming charged, and it's like a glow off the mast of the ship that because that's like the point where it's these lines of divergence in the electric and the electric field is what it
Mm.
is, and that's where the lightning will always strike at the point with the highest divergence in the electric field, which is
Ah,
the principle behind how a lightning rod actually works and why it works to attract the lightning.
cool. Jedi Knight Anakin Quindrunker says thoughts on Amuamua.
Oh man, Avi Loab, interesting guy. I mean, that interstellar visitor just it was
It's cool.
aimed at this. It was aimed at our solar system on just the right path, just the right trajectory to take it right here, loop around the sun, and take it right back out of the. I mean, it's too
And
perfect.
it accelerated and it changed trajectory.
Yes,
That they don't understand how they did that, and that alone makes me want to know more about it. And it's like,
absolutely.
how did it change trajectory? And that there's a scientist out there that's being kind of shunned because he's like, it has to be alien technology because it changed trajectory. You explain how it changed trajectory then, like how?
It's
You
kind of
know?
hard to. I mean, the scientific community is just reacting how it always has.
Right.
It's like the Roman Catholic Church in some ways, but he's the hard guy to discredit. I mean, he's head of the Harvard astronomy department
For decades he
you know.
was. For decades. I mean, not anymore though. I don't think he
He's
was.
a very smart guy, and
Yeah, he
he
is.
makes a solid argument. I mean,
Agreed.
it's
Agreed.
it's and I commend him for having the guts to do that. And I think
Agreed.
this is only the start. I think this is only the start because as more prominent scientists see that it's this time for taboo and ridicule is kind of going away.
Yeah.
We still have to be careful of pseudoscience but our again, there's been all kinds of arguments over what is pseudoscience and Popper falsifiability. Popper is the one that all the scientists refer to when they talk about what is pseudoscience versus
Yeah.
what's real science, and is it falsifiable? But necessarily it doesn't always turn out that way. Certain things, like string theory is not necessarily falsifiable, but it doesn't mean that it's not really. I don't know. It is. It's science is so complicated sometimes that it's not as cut and dry as some people try to make it. Just like cold fusion would have been considered pseudoscience, and if you talk to a lot of scientists in the world today, some of them might even still think cold fusion is pseudoscience. That doesn't mean that in 50 years from now we won't have working cold fusion reactors, right?
Right on, right on.
So it's
I got to just say, Akios Salisbury, he's been super chatting me multiple times today. He goes botanist here, pulling his hair out. It's biloba, not
biloba.
that's how you pronounce it. Cool, awesome. From a botanist, so we've heard
I
it's
thought it was Bilbo,
biloba.
like Bilbo Baggins.
Right. Maybe you were
So thank
influenced
you for
by it.
that correction.
Thank you, Akios.
I read, I do a lot of reading, but
Yeah,
I don't just, that's why I need to get more scientists on my show to talk to them so I
right,
can actually hear how these words are pronounced, and
right.
rather than just reading them and doing it myself.
The man behind the
I,
screen says, "Have either of you read the short story or watched the short film? They're made out of meat. If so, thoughts on the premise that we're being ignored." I haven't. I don't know this. Do you know it? They're
um,
made out of meat. I haven't heard it. I don't know what it is.
no, I've never heard of that. I know that we're all made out of meat. We're just a meat colored skeleton.
Yeah,
We're just ghosts riding a meat colored skeleton.
basically. Zach Tate says, "We stop fighting as a race, then we get answers." Yes, stop fighting each other. We're all the same. We're all the same. DG says, "Another weird thing that the vortices on the surfaces of water produces shadows that look exactly like black holes." Hmm,
Oh
that's
yeah,
cool.
there's a study
That's
that they
cool.
were doing on draining the there's like a draining the tub water study that they were doing to like kind of understand vorticity and black holes, and
Yeah.
also if information could escape from the horizons of them by putting wave information on the wave surface around the vortex as it's going down the black hole, down the tub, down the hole of the tub. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going on with black holes, and starting to understand those. But I like to think of like the whole holographic thing, that whole argument that Leonard Susskind came up with, and I'm probably butchering it, but the idea of information being like a hologram on the surface of this black hole, that it to explain Hawking's information paradox and that whole thing. And that's kind of what I'm envisioning for like our warp drive. You almost like creating a black hole on the surface of this warp drive. This skin coating of your warp drive is you're creating like almost like a black hole,
Yeah.
or at least something that satisfies the Schwarzschild condition in some way or another. And you're creating this hologram on the surface of that. The hologram being what gravity sees when it sees your craft, and sort of how matter responds to the displacement within the hologram, and then you're adjusting the lighting, or you're doing optical effects to manipulate this hologram to sort of bend space time and bend the reality of where that thing reconciles optically with the rest of the universe.
Yeah. It's almost like an
And
evolution from the technology we were talking about, how these new drones that can literally get rid of the air in front of them. It
right,
feels like that is the natural evolution of that technology into entering how to open up the space in front of them and
yeah,
manipulate that. It's pretty cool.
yeah. The way that there's definitely some overlap in that. I feel that those machines that use those wet microwaves to move matter around can also there's also got to be a way to trap light and use it to warp the actual fabric of reality itself. And when you read those patents about the Navy having the ability to do that and stuff, and I know that those patents that they released aren't would never be the real deal, and give secrets away about the real technology. It's just a way of letting people and our adversaries know that we have it, or at least bluffing that we have it. Some people think they're bluffing. I think they actually have it. I think it would explain a lot of the sightings of these things that are flying around, and I think that there's a lot of the technology that's existed for years, and so much of it has been coming out in the last 3 to 4 years, through, I don't know who's letting it out or declassifying all this stuff, but we've been after a lot, knowing hints about a lot of this stuff in the process, and just talking about it for years on the internet. Even if we're in our own little information bubble, like it's at least getting it out there into the waves, into the internet, and
Hmm. So follow
slowly.
him for more information. Down in the description below, you can find all of his stuff, Twitter, his YouTube channel, and definitely check it out. We got a couple more super chats. I just want to get through these. Sejong the Great says, "Remember, the Roman Catholic Church was the science department back in the day. Modern science hasn't skipped a beat since then." That's a good point. Twin Peaks Fan Club says, "How can you say you don't know if aliens exist when you talk about Roswell all the time? What did we recover at Roswell if it wasn't from aliens?" I mean, but you even heard him say earlier about how the government themselves fed information to these people that were
Yeah.
seeking any alien tech they could find, listening for alien stuff. And they were like, oh, they're looking for aliens. Let's implant it so that they think it's aliens instead of actually thinking that we're researching some crazy deep technology that we don't want anyone to know about.
An
Right. So,
interesting thing about Roswell is right. It is yeah. It could have been. It could have been. Now it could have been Operation Paperclip scientists working on some other kind of tech, and that's what
right.
crashed. But the interesting thing is that they used a top secret program as the cover story, the Project Mogul, the weather balloon
Uh,
project.
right.
So whatever, if it was something more secret, like it almost reeks that it was something more secret than that Project Mogul, right? Because if that's the cover story, if you use a cover story that's a top secret project, then
Yeah.
there's got to be something even more secret than that.
Right.
You know what
Exactly.
I mean?
Exactly.
It's suspicious. So
Well, listen, that we've gone over, but that's okay. It was great subject matter. I'm gonna give you the camera. Why don't you tell everyone how to follow you, what you're doing next, how they can, keep, just following what you're doing, and tell us a little bit about what you've got. And there you go.
yeah, man. Alienscientist.com is my main website. I'm doing lots of updates to that periodically. We have altpropulsion.com where we run these conferences and we talk a lot about alternative propulsion concepts and technologies that are coming out of the woodwork on this stuff. Um, the APEC conference is going to be this Saturday on Alien Scientist on YouTube, so definitely tune in to check that out. We have Dr. Paul Laviolette and Dr. Mike McCulloch speaking at this one, and they're both very interesting. You don't want to miss what they have to say. Mike McCulloch's quantizedinertia.com, and Paul Laviolette wrote this book here, Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. We're going to be asking him tons of questions, so tune in for that on Saturday and come check that out. You can, find out more about me online. Contact me on Twitter, alien_scientist. Please get at me if you're interested you're a scientist, you have information to share, you have knowledge, you want to just, even if you want to have a podcast and you want to get me on your show and come talk to you, man, I'm open to talking to anyone. I don't discriminate against people that have big channels versus people that have small channels. If you are interested and hungry for the information, and you're someone that can ask intelligent and great questions that are going to expand the way I think about things, or the way your audience thinks about things, I'm willing to help you learn and share that information.
Awesome, awesome. I got one more super chat I'm going to read real quick. Ken Wheeler, this is from Chaos again. Ken Wheeler explains how the universe really works, already unified, including metaphysics. Give him a look. YouTube channel, Theoria Apophysis. Cool.
Yeah.
I'll definitely check that out.
Those are the Electric Universe guys. It's interesting because there's like a lot of alternative science groups popping up, and it just shows how much regular people are distrusting the mainstream church of academic science and stuff.
Right
And
on.
it's not all good, because you had kind of in order to overturn the church, you have to know their scriptures inside and out and be able to speak their language, which is mathematics. And I don't really see enough of that on those channels, unfortunately.
Yep. Yep.
But that's my only criticism of that.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me. What a fun show. I feel like we could have gone a lot deeper on all the different subjects, but of course, my show is only an hour and a half long. Of course, we're going on 2 hours right now. Totally worth it. Thank you all for joining. Also, for those who are still with us, I really do appreciate it. Tune in tomorrow night. It's jam night. I'm going to be jamming on my guitar back there. Also, tune in later tonight. I'm going to be doing my Twitch stream. I'll probably be playing some Valheim, some Viking action with my buddy Ferk. And then, he's wearing the Luke shirt with the Tim beanie. He was recently in the Tim compound. I guess was influenced by them. So, right on. Well, thank you everybody, and all of you have a wonderful night. And thanks again for joining me, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Adam. Have a good night.